Fourth time. A Trip to Infinity. A 5-MeO DMT trip report by Hector the Crow. Posted to earbud.org January 15th, 2004. The following is a report I wrote this morning, concerning my first strong tryptamine experience. It was typed 30 minutes after the peak. Hey there. Okay, well, my business, that stinks of profundity, is to describe the trip, integrate the trip as soon after tripping as I can. Now's the time I dictate. I wonder, what was real, or what is real? I don't want a narrative. I want a meta-chronological gestalt of the whole trip. Well, I can tell you. The flash I've been looking for. The transcendence. The boundary dissolution. I finally got there. The breakthrough. I'm confused as hell and hardly know how to describe it. Tagging any words to its shining essence feels hideously futile. But something compels me to try. There was boundless joy, infinite joy, only a brief moment of terror, bafflement, beyond lingual bafflement. This was not elves, no self-dribbling basketballs, I can tell you that. A broad bonk on the head with a blunt cerebral celestial filler, a cleansing for a brief moment. In that moment, I was cleansed of self. Myself washed away. It really happened. It was not just a theory. It was a reality. The ontology alteration, the shattering of the world is fully gone, but psychological aftershocks are still buffeting me as I write this. Jostling. Stunned. Christ. Do I describe this experience using words like good and bad? Do I impose values on it? Somehow that doesn't seem right. Abstract as possible, concrete as possible. I keep wanting to contradict, to do opposing things at once. Somehow this relates to a philosophical theme of the trip, an intuitive insistence I had not planned for, nor had any anticipation of. When the real thing hits you, it's hard to know what to think. You should probably just shut up and look around. The world. Look around your head. But you can't, can you, you babbling fool? You want to write about it, in second person now. Okay, go ahead then. Maybe you'll wise up next trip. Because we are going to do this again, my precious. Soon, at a higher dose. Because as amazing as this experience was, I know there are levels above this. And that is staggering. I know if I can do a bit more with an open mind this time, I know I can get even farther out. Maybe transcendent with this strange transcendence. Okay, now I'll try and write a conventional trip report. My third experience resulted in about the same effects as the second, even though I thought I added more powder. This time I was very liberal with the powder, estimated at 10 to 15 milligrams. I was determined to get to the next level this time. And well, I did. I sat down and took one big long toke, 15 seconds of inhalation. I started feeling it very early on, very strong and very definitely this time. I took another big long toke, 15 seconds. About halfway through this toke, I knew it was escalating towards some novel perturbation of consciousness, something I had not experienced yet. Well, I was in for a ride. It's possible that I may have taken a third toke. I may have not. I actually don't remember, because somewhere during the second toke, I phased out of the regular universe I was accustomed to and emerged into something else. I felt pulled into some swirling foreign reality, panic immediately gripping me, but I struggled to remain calm. My whole field of vision seemed to distort, as a field, as if what I saw was a flat texture being pulled off of some larger underlying essence. This was me stepping out of my four-dimensional matrix of space-time and encountering something greater. I couldn't quite handle the vertigo. I had to do something about it. So I decided to move. I got up off the chair, fell onto the couch, This leads me to believe that maybe I wasn't as high as I could have been, that being tranced and incapacitated, abandoned to the void. Anyway, I lay there, overwhelmed, fearing my mind had been taken too far to ever return to sanity. This was far beyond any psychedelic state I had yet encountered. This was completely new. For a few seconds, I wanted nothing greater than to return to my previous state of consciousness. I felt the panic of the lucid dreamer trapped in a nightmare. Anything could happen. I felt the terror of an impending obliteration. Of what, I was not sure, but I knew it was too big for me, and I was right. The universe was not big enough for me and it both. It was me that was destroyed. Ego lost. I was not feeling a void, rather a transmutation of reality. I felt myself, my ego, slip away rapidly and completely, leaving a bizarre vacuum in the psyche that was now just a component of the universe. Everything just a component. The loss of self brought me a feeling of unity and complete oneness with everything. Infinity manifested as the doubt-destroying, blinding essence of existence. The self and my life were not real. Life is but a dream. And I had been awakened, shaken out of the hypnosis of that narrow, limited reality. I felt ecstatic that I had reached this state. I felt triumph. I felt enlightened. I felt every question was answered. And I felt immortal. But I couldn't say why. Profound, profane hilarity, cackles, giggles. I was on a profound, positive plateau, stretched as a pretzel figure-8 paradox strange loop. I felt like I'd finally inhabited certain mystic states. I felt neither cosmic consciousness nor solipsistic consciousness. The feeling was on another spectrum entirely. Words I carried were infinity and other. I went to my bedroom through a bubbling, twisting, warping hallway, got on my computer and typed. For a second, I was ready to anoint everyone enlightened divinity. I typed my ecstasy, which started to dissolve into skepticism, with revelations fleeting like nitrous oxide truths. William James's axiom rang in my head. Everything in this universe is the smell of burnt almonds. Might as well have been. Was. I was far more than myself, and far less as well. I felt filtered into a meta-self, shaken from self, loose, drifting, free. But with nagging skepticism, I thought, was it all real? What does it mean? Should I care what it means? And why am I even asking this? The jolt from this other world back to my reality was jarring, hard. Mundanity sweeping in, window closing. What do I make of it? What do I make of it? Pressure to make something of it, strain. Knowledge that I'll forget what it was like. I'll have to forget, right? How can I retain it? There's no way that's possible. I'll forget, and what's worse, I won't believe. I'll believe I was hyperbolizing, souping up the description. Well, I don't know. That was then, and this is now. And time keeps on slipping away. What was once a dilated near infinite moment is now an afternoon going by much too quickly. A trip fading. Allowing myself to indulge in the banality of spell check is the final sign that I'm down for good. Lol. Why did I type? I shouldn't have tried to English it so soon. I should have experienced, not recorded. Oh, this is all lies though. Language. Ego loss, for me, whatever that is something that I, myself, can't really make sense of after the phenomenon is over. I only remember it as a pale fact, not a reality. If my experience on 3 grams of shrooms was a 5 or 6 on DM Turner's scale, the 5-MeO DMT flash was probably a 7 or 8. Certainly a jolt, an unambiguous blast into new territory. And still, I must go further. I'd rather use NN-DMT than 5-MeO DMT, as the former is allegedly much more visual, I assumed the hallucinations could better help me assign meaning to the experience. But for now, 5-MeO is what I have to work with. And it's definitely powerful stuff in its own right. A classic awakening from the Dream of Life report that I've not really covered in quite a while. These are my favourite reports to cover in the first few years of Vivec. Really, my whole modus operandi was to share mystical experiences that can be experienced on certain substances, and 5-MeO DMT was always the poster boy for ego transcendence and realization of infinity, God, source, the life force, whatever you want to call it. It was always really fascinating for me because I'd had glimpses of that. I've talked about it many times before. I've had a very direct, visceral breakthrough from the illusory nature of physical reality on LSD 2 times, and then a really quite violent, not violent in a disturbing way, but violent in a sort of literally thrust it on me, like hit me over the head with awakening. My 4-ACO DMT 90mg experience, which I must give an addendum. I didn't actually want to take 90mg. I ended up overdosing. I completely misjudged the dose. So in a sense, I was always in for some form of rude awakening. But yeah, I guess the word violent has too many negative connotations. It was just very direct and blunt in a sense. There was no escape. And in a sense, that was the most beautiful thing ever, because it was one of the only times, in fact, the only time I've ever had a breakthrough experience and surrendered to it and not been sort of dragged into it like my LSD experiences. My first breakthrough, the first time I ever experienced anything that I could describe as being a facet of God or the universe in its totality, was completely unbeknownst to me. I had no idea any of this stuff existed. In fact, I went completely insane. But then, reflecting on the experience, I realised the beauty of it, because it was so unbelievably ecstatic and euphoric and even orgasmic that it was just shocking that this amount of love can be experienced physically, spiritually, mentally by my own consciousness or any mind in general. I really like the use of language here, where he describes that it was just it's just a flittering memory. It's a pale recollection of the actual experience, having to write it up. We can only use our imagination, and imagination can be very powerful to replicate the narrative of the experience in our minds, and it can do a really good job, especially if you've had mystical experiences and some transcendent states under your belt, and it can be easier to imagine people's experiences written in this sort of format. But if you've never actually experienced anything like that, it can be rather confusing, mind-bending, and even so confusing and so complex to the point where I don't even blame many people for dismissing this as being fake, complete BS, because at the end of the day, most people have never experienced anything like what my man has described here, awakening from the dream of life. That is some profound, heavy statement to imply that reality is a dream. But like, for me, in my own direct state of being as the Vivec ego, I know that I have experienced states very similar to this on 4-ACO DMT and LSD, and even had glimpses of it on mushrooms as well. And the 90mg 4-ACO DMT trip was just something else entirely. It was like I'd had experiences of like sort of solipsistic consciousness and the collective consciousness, but what I experienced in 4-ACO DMT was like, it was like I became a galaxy brain. It's like I became the mind of a whole galaxy itself, and I sort of saw galaxies as like conscious, not even beings, but like a conscious arrangement of stuff, of matter, of information, and within that, within its neurons are processes like humans and animals and nature and everything that can be contained on the planets, and all the planets interconnect, and they're like bigger neurons and they all interlink. And I became that, and there was also this presence of like a divine female entity that I couldn't see, but I sensed and spoke to in my own mind. I sensed her as being like this purple aura, and I couldn't see her, but it was like, it was in my, so viscerally in my mind's eye or third eye or whatever. There was no me there, by the way. There was no Vivec ego. There was no ego self at all. In fact, the ego death was so sharp, I didn't even have chance to panic. It just literally just happened. It was the smoothest yet bluntest ego death I could ever imagine, whereas all my other ego death experiences have been very chaotic, with a lot of struggle to surrender. And the 4-ACO DMT one was very similar to how Hector the Crow describes his trip to infinity. I've not experienced infinity, but it was like a glimpse of infinity, because I mean, it was definitely higher than my human state, experiencing being a galaxy. It was weird because I was the galaxy, but then I also could perceive myself from the third person as being the galaxy. It was like I was self and other simultaneously, resulting in like a grander sense of self where it incorporated the other into it. It was really, really trippy, and has stayed with me ever since and really rewired my whole brain chemistry. Everything has changed since then. I've talked about it many times, but if anyone who doesn't know, my whole relationship with psychedelics and cannabis and any psychoactive substance completely changed, where every single time I get into like a peak state, not even with like substances, but even just meditating and just my day-to-day life, and if I contemplate hard enough, I can really tap into the experience, not be able to like replicate it, because literally I would have to become a galaxy. But what I can do is I can tap into the overall feeling and the essence of the experience and really deeply contemplate and try and pick apart what it was. And I have been doing for 3 years now, coming up to 3 years. It was in March 2022. It was during lockdown when my 4-ACO DMT enlightenment experience. I don't think it was an enlightenment experience. It was more like it was just a shift from my I say just trying to reduce it down to something simple, but it felt like a shift from my human state of mind to a higher state of mind, basically showing to myself that I am not my own mind, and I have sort of, as infinite collective consciousness, as consciousness in the highest sense, in the infinite universal sense, I've limited myself down into a human form so that I can experience limitation. This is often talked about through many spiritual texts, that God or consciousness or source goes inside itself, almost like giving itself a colonoscopy or something, where it goes literally inside itself and examines its inner parts and can become them. So it goes from the outer, it goes from like the all into the inner and becomes a subjective, limited form. But it's an aspect, it's a smaller aspect of itself in its grand totality. Very loopy, very trippy stuff. But I'm really happy to be featuring these awakening type experiences again. I know a lot of you have been clamoring for them, and it's good to share these sort of transcendent stories of people realizing infinite joy and boundless consciousness, all the good stuff, along with the struggles that can come towards actually reaching that point. Because there's going to be some fear, especially for like the restricted ego mind. The last thing the ego mind wants to do is let itself go and die. So there's going to be some fear and struggle and panic sometimes. Sometimes there isn't, like with my experience with 4-ACO DMT, but there was definitely a lot of fear. In fact, the most fear I've ever experienced when I ran through Manchester naked and resisted my ego death experience, where there was literally a white light that I could have run into, and I guess I could have experienced like higher states of unity and God. But instead I ran the opposite direction, sort of towards hell, and had to pay the price for that. But thankfully I learned from it and integrated it into my own experience, and it has been one of the most transformative things that ever happened to me. I would have never done Vivec without any of my crazy psychedelic experiences. But yeah, hope you took something from this, and let me know any more type of experiences that you'd like me to share, because I know there's gradations of experience that Tryp reports cover. There's like hell realms, astral realms, alien beings, infinite love, no self, complete nothingness, insanity, all the whole spectrum, and they're all just a facet of reality, and they're all worth exploring. And that's exactly why I do what I do with Vivec, and I don't discern between good and bad. I like to share the whole gamut of the psychedelic experience, and I hope you take something from that, and I know many of you do resonate with it, so that's awesome. Anyway guys, see you on the other side, and take care.